a tale of quiet power, betrayal, and ultimate redemption inside the cold walls of a corporate empire. When a hardworking logistics director is fired by the CEO's entitled son, he walks away without a word, but not without a plan. What follows is a masterclass in strategy, loyalty, and the slow, satisfying collapse of arrogance. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's story, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's legendary. I remember the exact moment Chase Langston walked into the office. Not just walked, strolled, like a man expecting a standing ovation for simply showing up. It was less than 24 hours after the board had quietly announced that Robert Langston, the CEO and founder of Langston Logistics, would be taking a temporary medical leave. Everyone knew what that meant. Heart attack on the 15th hole of a private course in Scottsdale. Gossip said the CFO's wife was with him. Who knows? And now here comes his only son, Chase. Designer sunglasses, jaw sharp enough to cut glass, a tan too perfect for Ohio. His shoes echoed on the marble floor. Expensive, polished, and entirely out of place in a company built on forklifts, freight manifests, and the occasional broken pallet. He looked around like the office was a boutique, and he was shopping for departments to dismantle. His eyes passed over reception, skipped the cubicles, and landed on me, sitting dead center in ops, 2 monitors up, half-eaten egg sandwich in hand. No clipboard, no title plate, just me. "You the guy who runs logistics?" he asked, his lips curling like the word logistics had a bad smell. I leaned back slowly, letting the question breathe. "I am logistics," I said. He gave a short, dismissive chuckle, the kind of laugh a man makes when he thinks he's the smartest person in the room and hasn't even read the manual. Then, without looking at my screen, without asking my name, he muttered, "We don't keep lazy people here," and turned to walk away. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Not because I didn't have words, but because rage has a flavor, and it mixes poorly with eggs. I sat there in stunned silence, the air so still I swear the office ficus died a second time. Here's what he didn't know. That desk, the one he stood in front of, was where I rebuilt our entire distribution chain after Hurricane Iris flattened our southern hub. It's where I negotiated our UPS bulk shipping contract during a nationwide labor strike. It's where I approved shipping reroutes during COVID, worked 18 Christmases without asking for overtime, and quietly handled every executive decision that touched the warehouse floor for 6 straight years. But I didn't say a word. Not then. Instead, I stood up, closed my laptop, took my mug, my backup drive, and my field notes on a supply route project worth $1.3 million in next year's savings. All of it, mine. No panic, no drama, just surgical calm. That kind of silence isn't weakness. It's power choosing restraint. Chase watched from the corner of the room, wearing a smirk like he'd just won, like he was already imagining how he'd phrase it in an Instagram post. Had to make a tough call today. Leadership means cleaning house. Something like that. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I walked out, but not before pausing at the security desk. Marcus, our overnight guard, looked up from his crossword. Good guy. Worked night shifts beside a flickering vending machine for a decade. "Make sure this gets to Robert Langston," I said, handing him a sealed envelope. "Directly. Not his assistant. Him." He nodded, no questions asked. That's trust built over years. Inside that envelope, a certified, notarized clause from my executive agreement, section 7.4.13, signed by Robert himself back in 2017. A clause that said if I was terminated without cause by anyone other than Robert Langston, I was entitled to 3 years' salary paid in full within 48 hours, plus bonuses, plus lifetime dental. And this was the kicker, a non-compete release. I wasn't just leaving, I was setting the stage. The next morning, before 7 a.m., Robert stormed into HQ with a silk tie half-tied and a blood pressure cuff still dangling from his wrist. I wasn't there to see it. I was at home, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug, feeling something rare and warm. Peace. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Marcus. Celia from accounting. Susan from legal. Each message more frantic than the last. He opened the envelope in front of the board, Susan said, nearly breathless, read the clause out loud, turned the color of wet ham. Then he said, We owe him how much? That wasn't just a severance, it was a panic parachute. And Chase? Chase had pulled the wrong cord. By the time Robert Langston fired his son Chase in front of half the ops team, voice shaking, eyes wide with that particular mix of anger and heartbreak, it was already too late. The damage wasn't just emotional, it was systemic. And it hadn't even finished unfolding yet. What none of them knew, not the board, not legal, not even Robert, was that Chase had already lit the fuse. You see, while he was busy playing Overlord, Chase had logged into the admin system the night before my exit. He initiated a series of permissions changes, subtle but dangerous. Warehouse admins were locked out, invoice chains were rerouted, export logs recoded to redirect through a third-party data filter based in Austin, Texas. At first, IT thought it was a glitch, maybe even a routine system update. But by 9:03 a.m., someone from InfoSec found the trail. And at the end of that trail was a digital fingerprint. C. Langston Consulting, a shell company registered to none other than Chase himself. The plan was clear. He wasn't just trying to impress Daddy. He was trying to steal the very infrastructure that made Langston Logistics tick, white label it, and sell it back as a vendor. A consultant. A middleman to his own legacy. Desperate? Absolutely. Dumb? Not entirely. He just didn't understand the one truth every good operator lives by. Logistics is not something you plug into a Shopify account. He assumed I was a cog. What he didn't realize was I was the engine. And while he was busy pulling cables he didn't understand, I had already moved quietly, precisely. Not sabotage, not revenge. Call it insurance. For years, I'd been building a parallel system, not out of malice, but out of necessity. Faster, smarter, leaner. I mapped alternate shipping routes, created new vendor chains, even developed a proprietary algorithm that could predict inventory surges 6 weeks in advance. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden, just undocumented and entirely mine. Stored securely on a cloud server, accessible by only one keycard, mine. So when Susan from legal called again, voice an octave higher and 80% more panic, I told her gently, I don't work there anymore. Click. A minute later, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line, please reconsider. Charles wanted to meet, but by then I wasn't in the mood for second chances. I was sitting across from Michael Ashford, CEO of Atlas Corp. Tailored gray suit, Rolex that didn't scream wealth, it whispered it. He didn't waste time. Just slid a check across the table and asked, how's it feel, watching them choke on the hand that fed them? I smiled, but only slightly. Would have felt better if the kid hadn't been such an amateur. The check? Not blank anymore. The number? Enough zeros to make my accountant blush, but I didn't sign it, not yet. Give me 48 hours, I said. Then I walk in with everything. Everything? Michael raised a brow. I nodded. The system, the people, the vendors, the future. He leaned back, grinning like a man who just bought beachfront property minutes before a gold rush. And that night, I didn't sleep. Not from nerves, from strategy. Friday arrived like a storm with no thunder, quiet, inevitable, and deeply charged. By noon, I stood in front of Conference Room B, once reserved for meaningless quarterly updates and synergy slideshows. But today, it was a war room. Not for vengeance, but for rebirth. I walked in, no badge, no smile, just a manila folder and a storm tucked behind my ribs. Inside, 22 people. Not just any people. These were the warehouse leads who'd weathered peak seasons without sleep, the vendor liaisons who could negotiate across time zones, the schedulers who knew every truck by name and driver birthday by heart. They stood when I entered. I didn't ask them to. They just did. At the head of the table, someone had placed a Sharpie-scrawled placard that read, "The King in Exile." I took my seat, laid the folder down, and waited. Then the door creaked open again, and in stepped Robert Langston. Sweat on his brow, tie askew, flanked by legal, HR, and, somehow, Chase, looking like a frat boy who just learned no one saved him a seat at the reunion. Robert's voice cracked. What the hell is this? I didn't flinch. An agenda. I opened the folder. Item 1, mass departure. Effective 2 p.m. today. These 22 employees and I will formally resign. He scoffed, stepped forward, trying to intimidate. You're bluffing. I slid the papers across the table. Resignation letters, signed. Time-stamped. Mine? Notarized. Item 2, vendor shift. I've already spoken with 9 of our key suppliers. As of Monday, they'll be working exclusively with Atlas Corp, Chase laughed. They won't leave for. But the legal advisor's face had already drained of color. She knew it was done. Robert's voice lowered to a near whisper. You're torching everything. Over him? He glanced at Chase like he couldn't believe his own DNA. I leaned in. He lit the fire. I just turned it into a controlled burn. HR leaned toward legal and whispered something urgent. Robert looked like he'd aged a decade in a single breath. Finally, he asked it. The question that reeked of power, finally realizing it had expired. What do you want? I stood, slow and steady, closed the folder. Too late for what I wanted. What I want now is for you to watch. That's when Chase lost it. You can't do this. This is industrial sabotage. I reached into my coat and pulled out the flash drive, held it between 2 fingers like a tiny scalpel. This, I said calmly, this is a 6-year refined network of alternate routes, vendor frameworks, contract loopholes, and inventory predictors. This is the thing you tried to fire, the thing you tried to steal. Robert lunged, maybe out of desperation, maybe instinct. I pulled it back with a smile. Nope. And then I walked out. Past the stunned boardroom, past the intern pretending to type, past Marcus, who gave me the slowest, most satisfying nod I'd ever received, out of the building into a waiting car. Ashford sat inside, grinning. You get what you came for? I placed the flash drive in his hand. No, I said. I got everything. Across the street, Langston HQ looked like a battlefield dressed in business casual. Executives pacing on their phones, HR dragging chairs like stretchers. 23 resignations, 9 vendor defections, a logistics system gutted and reborn under my control. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration, evolution. By Monday, Atlas Corp wasn't just ahead. We were rewriting the playbook. The system I'd once built in the shadows now ran through every fiber of our operations. The 22 who came with me? No longer employees. Commanders, each with a raise, benefits, and real offices with windows. No more closets or corners. Even Marcus, our old night security guard, now served as our logistics security advisor, complete with stock options and an espresso bar. The loyalty they showed me? I returned it tenfold. Chase tried to save face, held a press conference in a rented co-working space, stammered through buzzwords like innovation and disruption. But the industry saw through it. One of our newest clients, a national retailer worth 7 figures, forwarded me a clip of the circus with a subject line that read, "Thanks for not being clowns." And Robert? He tried to reach out one last time. Quiet, desperate. But all I said was, I won't go public. And that was mercy. Because the truth, power doesn't scream, it moves. Silently, strategically. Tuesday morning, I made one final visit to his country club, left a folder on his table with a $48 million vendor contract, now signed with Atlas Corp. Robert looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. This isn't vengeance, I told him. It's evolution. You handed your throne to a fool. I built a future and handed it to the ready. Then I walked away, and behind me, an empire quietly collapsed. Subscribe to Life Stories for more powerful real-life dramas and lessons in resilience, leadership, and quiet revenge.